Good evening and welcome to day 11 of the 2021 Milwaukee Film Festival presented by Associated Bank. I'm Kara, the artistic director at Milwaukee Film, and this is the Nightcap presented by the Ibuki Family Foundation. A few housekeeping items before we get started. Please remember to cast your vote for the Alan H. Budd and Suzanne L. Seelig Audience Award. To vote, you visit the film or shorts program page at watch.mkefilm.org, and you'll click on a button that says Vote Now to be taken to a form that serves as your ballot, where a 5 is excellent, and you don't need to know about any of the other numbers because these are all excellent films. Votes this year are due by 11:59 p.m. on the 19th, that's Wednesday night, because we will be announcing all of our awards, our audience awards, and our jury awards at a live virtual ceremony on closing night, 7 p.m. on Thursday, May 20th. If you're watching right now live, same place, different time. Make sure you tune in to see whether your favorite films have won. As you've seen, as a festival watcher, we have a Double Up Challenge happening. Susan and Bob Michelet have generously offered us $50,000 if we raise that, and we did. So they've stretched us to raise an additional $25,000, $75,000 total, before the end of the festival. And if we do so, they will double that. There's a couple ways you can help us out with that. You can go text Double Up to 44321. You can go to mkefilm.org and donate at any amount. Or if you're not already a member, join us as a member and your membership dollars will be doubled. As of this morning, we were just under $54,000. So we have a little ways to go before Thursday, before the festival turns into a pumpkin. So please consider helping us meet that goal. And newly announced, everyone who donates at any amount will be entered into a raffle to win a free private screening at the Oriental Theater after we reopen later this summer. So please consider helping us make that goal. It means a lot to us as a nonprofit. And as a nonprofit, I would be remiss if I didn't thank our members. Members keep us going, keep us able to bring great films to you on your home screens and eventually those cinema screens. Members get free films every month, discounts, lots of goodies. But most importantly, they help us do year-round programs and sustain our mission. So thank you, members. If you're not already a member, consider joining. And if you are, help us spread that word. This evening, we are having a 3-part Q&A for the shorts program, 3 Ways of Looking at Milwaukee. We have 3 films in the program, 3 filmmakers here to talk to us about those films. We'll be joined by the directors of Bid Caller, The Heartland, and Milwaukee Night and Day, which comprise the 3 Ways of Looking at Milwaukee program. If you're watching live, feel free to throw questions and comments in the chat wherever you are. They'll make their way to us and we'll fold them in. And without further ado, I'd like to welcome to the virtual stage the director of Bid Caller, David Auken. Hi, David.
Hi.
So I want to start with kind of where did this film start? How did you meet or get access to Harold and Marilyn and their incredible story?
I guess it started basically. I moved to Milwaukee back in 2014, and actually I got a job working for the Bethausers. I started out working in their shop that's featured in the film, and then on to work with Harry, going out to estates, and also worked the auctions as well. So that was kind of my introduction to the Bethausers.
So you were sort of part of, we sort of see that the company is kind of a family of sorts, it feels very familial, and you were a part of that family. At what point were you like, oh, wait, I think this is a film?
So I moved. I live here in Portland, Oregon. I moved back to Portland in
Mm.
2016, and I just in 2018 I finished a video production program here in Portland. And sometime during my studies is when the idea came to me, and I think at first I'd thought about doing the project as a student project, but it just didn't make sense to try to get a bunch of students from Portland to Milwaukee. And
Right.
so, I just decided that it was going to be the first project I wanted to direct outside of school. So,
Yeah. Huh. So when you came back to Harold and you were like, all right, so here's an idea, I want to make a movie, was he receptive to that idea? And then knowing him and his work so closely, what did you sort of see differently, maybe like through the camera? Are there things that were unexpected for you that you didn't already know?
I think their reception to me asking, they were willing to participate from the start, which was really great. And I think our relationship, me having worked with them for a year, really kind of perpetuated a natural
Mhm.
subject and director relationship. I'm trying to think of what came up that I couldn't have expected.
Yeah.
Did a lot of prep work in the months before coming to Milwaukee to shoot. And we had so little time. We shot in 6 days. I kind of had an idea of what I really had hoped to
Yeah.
capture, and it was all kind of drawn from just my experiences in working with the Badhousers.
Hmm. Yeah. And it captures, them and their, incredible characters, uh, warm, but also like, unusual personalities. But it also has this like deep, like what I write here, scrawny vibes. There's cannibal sandwiches. There's breweriana. It's like so Wisconsin at moments. And so, it's surprising for me to hear, and I'm not originally from Wisconsin, so who am I to judge? But that you were here for a really short amount of time, but maybe a really intense time, kind of steeping in their around their stuff. I mean, it's like the power of objects, really. Did you know that the film was like going to be about, yeah, like people's attachment to things? Like, was that always kind of a theme you wanted to draw out, or did that sort of happen naturally?
Yeah, that was definitely one of the main themes I wanted to explore with the piece. Was human relationship with material items,
Mm-hmm.
going along with, I guess I like this. Way I look at it, there's like two kind of main themes I really wanted to explore, and two sides of the spectrum being levity, which we see, in the joy of the auctions and
Yeah.
Harry's kind of over the top personality. And then some of the darker themes in contrast that we explored, and one of them being, you know, sometimes the unhealthy attachment to material items, but also, the loss that's kind of goes hand in hand with the auction business
Mm-hmm.
all
Right.
along. And I saw that so much working with him in the year I did. So
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of
Yeah.
what I hope to capture.
Yeah. I love that the film ultimately is kind of, yeah, like a baby homage to your year, right? It's like these are all the things that I learned and that I want to share with others. And you're able to do that with this film is fantastic. You filmed this in January or December, January of 2019. There's a Christmas party in there. It's sometime later. Um, do you have any updates about Harold and Marilyn? Have they seen the film? I know that you tell how are they?
They're doing well. Yeah, they've seen the film, and they've loved it. So I was really, really happy about that. And they just went back to in-person social distanced auctions, I think in mid-April. So
Okay.
yeah, they're back at it from having to stop due to the pandemic for a while, but they're
Yeah.
they're doing well, going strong. So
Great. Yeah. And so, yeah, well, I feel like we're going to introduce a whole new Wisconsin like audience who's going to be like, I need to go to this auction and see what I find. Right. Yeah. So what's next for you? What new projects are you working on? What else is happening with the film? How can people follow along on its journey?
Yeah, so the film, this is the first festival we're in, so it's our official premiere, which is awesome. It being with the Milwaukee Film Festival in Milwaukee. It's kind of a dream, really, for the project, but we've submitted to quite a few other festivals, and hope to get into a few in the fall and even before that. So that's kind of the trajectory of this of Big Caller, and myself. I've got some more documentary projects in the pipeline, but all of them are kind of in the research and design stages. But I'm doing some video production work here in Portland for some nonprofit cultural organizations and other kind of independent projects that I'm supporting for other folks as well. So
great. That's good stuff to be able to kind of give back those talents, and for causes I assume you care about or organizations you care about is wonderful. Fantastic. We're going to have you hang around because we're going to bring you back at the end and try to talk Milwaukee across all three films. But before I'll say goodbye to you for now, and thank you so much for the film, for sharing it with us, and for your time. We really appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you, Kara. Thanks for having me.
Totally. And I'm going to pass the virtual mic to Dr. Dante McFadden.
Thank you, Dr. Kara Akbar. Greetings, everyone. I would like to call forth Marquise Mays, the filmmaker behind the Heartland. It is featured in this program, 3 Ways to Look at Milwaukee, as well as the Black Lens Shorts program, We Change the Narrative. Marquise, great to have you.
Thanks for having me. Super excited to be here.
No doubt. And congratulations are in order, not just for your film being in the festival, but I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that you are the recipient of the No Studios Marquette Diedrich College of Communication Filmmaking Fellowship. So congratulations on that as well.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Thank you. I'm trying. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
No doubt. Not just trying, but succeeding. So I would love for you to begin by telling the audience about your personal history and your roots in Milwaukee.
Yeah. My roots in Milwaukee stem from a legacy of Black women who are from the South. So my great-grandmother is from Mississippi, and on my dad's side, my grandmother is from Louisiana. So they moved here looking for better lives, looking for better opportunities for their children and for the lives that they wanted to provide for their children. And I am a part of a legacy of strong Black women who have sacrificed so much. And I think that I am like not only a testament to like their many prayers, but like a lot of the work that they put forth. I think I'm a testament to that. And that's kind of my personal history to the city, being raised by Southern Black women, but also being able to really find myself and what my kind of relationship to Blackness was through them in a city like Milwaukee, where we have 4 seasons, where we have like all these different nuances that aren't in the South. I think that kind of encapsulates all of my whole personal history in the city.
Most certainly. And I'd like to know what attracted you to filmmaking.
Yeah, I think what attracted me to filmmaking, I've always loved films. My uncle would, during the summers in Milwaukee, there wasn't a lot for Black kids to do. So my uncle would get me and all of my cousins together in his van and take us to the movie theaters at Northtown or Mayfair, and we would spend the whole day there. Like we would sneak into movies. Please don't sneak into movies, y'all. Pay for movies. But we would sneak into movies and we would be there for the whole day. My uncle would go see action films. My cousins would go see the new action films, and I would go see animation, right? So I always loved films. But I think it was when I got, when I went through undergrad and I was in college, where I was just like, wait, the people that I hang around, the people that I know are all just interesting people with these very complicated stories that deserve to be told. And I think that's when I found an affinity to filmmaking specifically, because I started off as a journalist and I had a real issue with objectivity. I had a real issue with the idea of like me having to be objective in journalism and what that meant during the time, especially during the rise of like Black Lives Matter. And
Right.
I just wanted to do something that was not only testing or interrogating what it means to be objective, but also what it means to tell our stories in the most authentic way as possible. So I think blending my journalism skills and blending the community that I already had around me kind of fell into the life of filmmaking. But I'm a researcher first. So like I'm a scholar. I study film, and I've studied film for years before I actually felt comfortable with picking up a camera and doing it. So that's kind of how I came to film.
Awesome. You mentioned Northtown Cinema as well as the AMC at Mayfair. So I'm intimately familiar with those movie houses, from back in the day. And, how did you come about developing the Heartland?
Yeah, the Heartland came it was kind of obviously came from COVID, what happened with COVID and me having to move back to Milwaukee. And I think being away from Milwaukee for college and then graduate school, I was eager to come back to the city, and I was eager to relearn the city. I was eager to relearn everything about it, because everything, like, I couldn't go anywhere else without being a kid from Milwaukee. Like, I always brought that with me, whether it was the lingo or the language or like the charisma, anything, I would always bring it back with me. So I came back to Milwaukee and I was super excited to make films here or whatever. And I think the thing that got me was when I was talking to my little cousins, and they range from, the ages of like 9 to 13. And these young kids are just like, we don't want to be here. Like, what else is there for us to do? Can we leave? I can't wait to leave. And, at the ages of 9 and 13, of course, I had my issues with the city, but I think I had more love for the city during that time than I did hate. So that surprised me. And that really kind of put something in me to say, like, hey, like, I want the kids now to be able to be proud of where they're from, because everything that they're learning here, the identities that are forming here when they leave, is going to matter so much, because it's going to force them or make them want to come back anyways. So I wanted them to find and foster a pride for this city, because not only do we deserve to have that as Black kids, but I think we all can understand that it's complicated for Black kids to grow up here. So what does it look like for you to be able to acknowledge that, but then also talk about the love that you have for a place,
Mm-hmm. And Marquise, everything that you just said about Milwaukee, and everything that your film, captures so poignantly, reflects, pretty much my upbringing in Milwaukee. We represent two different generations, but the issues still persist. And I know Leaders Igniting Transformation, had some involvement with this film. And could you say more about that?
Yeah, they listened to my crazy ideas and they just let me do it. I would say it was really great. I would say Leaders Igniting Transformation provided me the platform to be able to really make something. I think I was coming back and to kind of piggyback, I graduated with a film degree from USC, and I was a researcher. I was planning on just teaching and educating. I wasn't thinking about making films for some time. And I think Leaders Igniting Transformation, like, they gave me not only the confidence to tell the story, but they kind of reinforced the fact that I'm capable of telling it and that I should be telling it, right? So not only did they provide the resources, but they funded majority of the film, and they paid my people. And it was such a smooth and easy process that I was just like, yo, I love indie filmmaking, and I love community filmmaking, and I love what that looks like and how that can look, right? So they definitely played a beautiful role in like providing me the space to make this story what it was without feeling like I needed to hit a specific political target or political goal. They kind of really just let me speak, and I appreciate that.
And how did you land on the three central people who are in the film?
Yeah, I talked to a lot of people for the Heartland, and it breaks my heart a lot of the times because I talked to a lot of people, and I think it came down to who was in conversation with each other. And I think that is the biggest thing that I'm learning, especially as an emerging documentary filmmaker, is your subjects have to speak to one another. And it kind of has to be like a constant flow of conversation. And coming down to those main three, it was based not only on them being in conversation with each other, but their specific personalities that kind of rounded out like, all right, these are the people who are going to speak, whether it was Casey and her like not only poetic way of speaking, but the history of how she knows the city, like how she knows it, right? And how she can speak about these things eloquently, but then also very vividly. She can speak about it in descriptive ways. Then moving to Radea, who is such a personality, who is such a light, right? Like she's such a light, and you can tell that is the charisma, that is the lingo, that is who we are. We had to have someone as boisterous as her in the space to speak as well. And then rounding it out with Matthew provided such calm and kind of very clear. And again, I say poetic because he is in theater as well, like a very poetic sense of bringing it all together and wrapping it all up. But we talked to a lot of people. We talked to a lot of people, and I don't want to dismiss those people as well because their stories matter just as much. And I even interviewed my older brother who talked about his experiences with mass incarceration, and it hurt me to have to cut that. But in the process of film, you have to find what is the most logical flow. But now my logic is now I have, 6 terabytes worth of interviews of people that could become not only their own stories, but that could be the beginning of so many other stories to happen in the city. So I look at it as an opportunity of like what other stories could be told outside of the Heartland. But I talked to a lot of people.
Yes. And would love to see what emerges from that if you decide to do something with that. And I just have one more question for you in terms of future projects. I'm aware of something that you're currently working on now, so if you could briefly talk about that for a bit.
Yeah, for sure. I am working. I am trying to keep myself busy. I am currently directing a feature documentary called Black Strings. And it is pretty much a feature documentary where I'm following the Black String Triage Ensemble. And it's just a group of musicians comprised of Black and Brown musicians from the city of Milwaukee who are trying to heal a very troubled city through the power of music, through the power of string instrumentation. And they do that by playing music at crime scenes immediately after it happens. And it's usually crime scenes that involve gun violence. And crime scenes that involve brown and black people specifically. Milwaukee has a lot of trauma in it, and Milwaukee, as a collective, we hold and harbor a lot of grief, and there are not a lot of opportunities for us to process grief. This group, the Black String Triage Ensemble, is seeking to help us not only process grief, but to help us like heal from it immediately. Not waiting for it to happen, but immediately allowing it to happen through the power of music. But also they're kind of remixing and revamping what it means to be a first responder, specifically in communities where the urgency of police is lackluster or the kind of violation of media is kind of all about projecting Black death. They're really interested in interrogating what it means to be a first responder for community members. So that's what I'm working on, y'all. It's a really beautiful and heavy project, and I am in the thick of it right now. So I'm super excited, and I'm grateful to be working, and I'm grateful to be making stories, and that they trust me with the story. So that's what I'm doing at the current moment.
Thank you for that. And we'll see you a little later in the Nightcap.
Yes,
so check out Marquise Mays' film, The Heartland, both in the three ways to look at Milwaukee Shorts program, as well as the Black Lens Shorts program. We changed the narrative. I pass it back to Dr. Kara Akbar.
Thanks, Dante, and thanks, Marquise. And finally, our final film of the three is Milwaukee Night and Day. And so I'd like to welcome Dick Blau, the director, to the screen with me.
Thanks for having me, Cara.
Yeah. I don't know. Well, we're going to get to talk about all three films together, but like there was this magic moment where I was like, oh, wait, these three films sing together and like say more together than they do alone. But first we'll talk about your film alone. This project, not in its current form, but it's taken a number of forms. And I read that this started in 2009, and this is, what year is it? It's 2021. Can you talk a little bit about the sort of genesis of this work and the different forms that it's taken to get to this particular form?
Sure. My sweetie and I moved downtown in, actually, I think it was 2011. We're lucky enough to find a wonderful place 8 stories up that looked down on the major corner in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and Plankinton, which was also one of the kind of great architectural moments in the history of the city. It's probably everybody knows it's these beautiful white buildings built around the turn of the century, 1900, in what was the most optimistic and really kind of like a glorious moment of Milwaukee's development. And so there we were, but in a very different moment. When we moved here, the Plankinton Mall was failing. The building across the street, the Posner lofts had not been developed. It was basically a shell. And at the same time, it was a terribly exciting place to be. There was all kinds of stuff going on. There were 2 bars, 2 bus stops I could see from my balcony, and we were also up at the roof level, so I had these magnificent views. And I never actually made photographs of the store I started making. Most of my work has been domestic portraiture, kind of a rub and family, or studies in music and culture. Basically, people were up close and personal, and all of a sudden here I was at 8 stories, looking down at a very different scene in which the people were really very important, but not major characters in what I was developing. And at first I just started shooting at whatever was I thought was beautiful. And as my print drawers started filling up, I began to realize that I had something going, and started to look around and figure out what to do with it. And first thing, there were a couple of spaces in our building next to the mailboxes, and I kind of appropriated them and started taping up photographs. Didn't say who made them or anything like that. And of course they found out, and the co-op board bought me some frames, and then I started basically displaying 2 large photographs every 7 to 10 days. And it kept developing more and more photographs. I then decided, okay, I've got to do this is a semi-public art project right now. I think I want to make it a real public art project. And so I donated a couple of 100 pictures to the Historical Society, and then I talked with wonderful steakhouse on the corner, Moe's Steakhouse, who let me use their television monitors and also their live pianist who played. And so I took all of my pictures. I made a kind of slideshow with dissolves, and performed what I had come to call the 7:30 Project, named after our building. Performed it for 4 nights, 4 hours a night in the bar. And after that, I got ambitious, and I realized that Moe's had an empty storefront on Wisconsin Avenue. So I actually set up a rear projection there, and I projected these pictures with sound for 15 months every night, from dusk to dawn. And we had a dog. I'd been walking the dog around the block. So I take Gigi out at 11 o'clock and turn off the show. And then in the morning, I turn it, I just do that day after day. Really develop. I put a bench outside. It's the only bench on Wisconsin Avenue. I think, and I started to collect a small audience of homeless people, night workers, passersby. Some people just didn't notice, and other people were really kind of like gripped by it and would just sit and watch it. And once I'd done that, I was starting to think of what I should do next. And I decided I'd actually make a film, which is very different than making a slideshow, and involves all sorts of very kind of complicated calculations about how you turn single images into a coherent, let's call it a story. This is an experimental story, as those of you who've seen it will know. And so what I started to do was kind of like play with, separate the pictures I had into what seemed to be groups. And then I began kind of teasing out kind of strands of narrative from the pictures that I had made. And of course, if you're a photographer, you know this, you go around kind of like thinking about things kind of like underneath the surface, certain feelings, certain ideas. And of course, I was going around this block. My project was defined by the block itself. I was going around this block 3 times a day, morning, noon, and very late at night, seeing the same things and thinking many of the same thoughts. And so I began actually to kind of like try to kind of like pull these things together into something that would actually represent a passage over time, in which I would take 10 years of photographs and make a kind of, I called it a Joycean day, kind of after James Joyce's Ulysses, where you're covering history and also creating a kind of an autobiography as you go. And the history includes everything from the random marks on the sidewalk to the seagulls, to the residues of passersby, to the different events, parades, protests that occurred in this particular neighborhood. And that's what the film was constructed from.
Yeah. It's a long story, but it's one that sort of, you see these different audiences and these different forms that like the same image material can kind of make. Kirsten asks how many pictures, how many of that many hundreds, thousands of pictures that you had, how many made it into this version?
Around 700.
Okay. That's still a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot.
And I'm just imagining all the images that are in the drawer that aren't in the movie, that are in various other spaces. Yeah. So you talked about sort of like your work having previously had this kind of, like deep close-up humanness. And this project sort of developed its own constraints of, okay, here's this city block, this space, this vertical space, and this horizontal space, and this durational space that is mostly driven by a dog. And anybody who has walked a dog will know you end up stopping in the strangest places and noticing things you would never notice if you were not bound to their pace. I'm interested in hearing, like, in those constraints that you set for yourself or that were set for you, what discoveries you made in that.
Well, I discovered things. I had to think through a lot of things, and particularly in the way in which I approached the more difficult subjects that are in the film. Where I live, not so much anymore. There were like a lot of very poor people, and I wanted to address that, but I didn't actually want to do people who, like, if you remember the polar vortex, right? There were people who were sleeping on Wisconsin Avenue, and I didn't want to violate their privacy, but I wanted actually to kind of try to address what that meant, and what it meant to photograph them, and what the kind of the ambiguities and the ambivalences one feels as a photographer faced with this kind of suffering. And so I would work with things like that and really try to explore what my own feelings were. You know, what does it mean to be in the presence of someone who's really desperately poor, aside from giving them money, right? What does that mean? And so I try to deal with that in the film. And then I was also really interested in a certain kind of deeper narratives that I felt. For example, I'm somewhat afraid of the dark. I've been afraid of the dark since I was a kid, but there I was out in what was essentially a very lonely labyrinth night after night. And so trying to deal with those feelings with something, I had to take the dog out, right? But trying to deal with those feelings in some way that was like comprehensible was something that I really spent a lot of time on. And then there were points in the film where I was just looking at the sheer beauty of this neighborhood. I mean, it's really spectacular. There are fogs that come in, and those buildings rise in the mist like, I don't know, angels. And then there's that Wells Fargo building, which is basically a monstrosity in person, but that looks great, right? Covered with clouds. So it was that sort of thing that I was really that I discovered and worked with in the film.
Yeah. In watching the film, I discovered because I've never been at that angle on our city for long enough, I guess. I discovered this building has these copper green domes on the top of it that I had never noticed as kind of shapes in the way that they are from kind of on high. And I was just like, so there's discovery, and wait, what building is that? Which way am I looking? And then the joy of a virtual festival is that you can pause and go find it on a map and orient yourself and then go back. But can't do that in the dark cinema.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm just saying you can't do that in the dark cinema. Look at the map.
One thing that was really interesting to me is that the angle with which I look at the bus stops in particular is something that I actually saw and absorbed when I was a kid. I remember being in Holland when I was like 15, 16 years old, going to the museums and looking at the paintings by Bruegel, who was like one of the first great anthropologists as well as painters. And he had this view where he looked down at these like village squares where you've probably seen these paintings or reproductions of them. The children's games, all varieties of children's games from the Flemish countryside of like 1450 or whatever it was. But it was that angle of view that somehow stayed with me and that I recaptured in those photographs. So I really see it as kind of like going back very, very deeply into my past, as well as being located in the present.
Right. Well, and the way that you have it like an influence from like a much earlier moment in like art history, right? That creeps in. So you've talked a little about sort of like having to kind of confront and grapple with poverty differently through the camera and through, kind of the composition of the emotional tenor of the film. What else did you learn about Milwaukee through, either the sort of the photograph project or the assembly into this film?
I learned that it's a place that combines, and I think I read this in a paper every day. It combines, a physical beauty that we love with a poignance and a turmoil that cannot be avoided, and it's all of those things together that makes up the experience of living in a city. And it's got its particularities. It's also part of a much larger web of cities, and many of them experiencing the same sorts of dilemmas that we confront every day in our streets. And yet at the same time, it was like it was an in-depth look at a very, very small area. So we're talking about local knowledge here. And one of the reasons I actually think it was like so interesting to do is because so many other people have at least some of that local knowledge themselves. So many people pass this corner and leave their traces. So I thought it would be really interesting to do something where I could actually show people something new about a place that they thought they knew very well.
Yeah. And sort of the macro through the micro, I guess. Yes. But also sort of like, the macro within the micro, right? Of like the depth and layers that you wouldn't notice, even if you know it. because you haven't spent 10 years documenting like bits and pieces of it, right? None of us have done that. You are the only one. What's next for the film, for the project, the larger project, or for you creatively? What are you up to?
Well, I'm working on another version of the material. You see a small amount of the river in the film as it exists now. I was very, very interested in it, but I spent most of my time on the street until our dog died. And then I found I did not want to go around the block anymore. I actually started going to the river, which is really right out the back door.
Yeah.
And this is really became quite interesting to me because during the pandemic, when we were in lockdown, the only place I could really go for a walk was like, I don't know, 100 or 200 feet of river front. And so I started actually seriously photographing the river. And in fact, I developed a new way of looking at it that's actually very, very exciting to me. It's a kind of visceral abstraction. I'm going to be showing them at St. Kate sometime this next year, along with the film. So you can see what I was up to, what I've been up to there. I just did a first cull of the pictures that are going to be in the next version, and I have about 200 pictures that I want to work with there, and they'll be both prints, and then they'll also have an idea for a kind of I keep thinking of it as a sculpture with a kind of an ambient track. So that's the next thing I'm doing.
Yeah, that's very exciting and interesting. We talked about the river a little bit last night, or the rivers and the confluence that is Milwaukee. And so just like that theme is continuing to go. Well, thank you so much for your film, Dick. I'm going to bring everyone back on screen and we'll talk a little across all three films.
Great.
The second to last question I asked Dick, I want to actually kind of ask back to Marquise and David, which is sort of zooming out a little bit to the city, and how the making of the film maybe helped you learn something. Maybe it's a deepening, but kind of like about the city through kind of the focused gaze of filmmaking. Does one of you want to volunteer to start?
I'll go. I was trying to still trying to formulate my thought, but I think while making the film, I guess I would say while making the film, I realized how informed my Black experience was because of Milwaukee. And I think while making the film, one of my subjects, Casey, said in the film so eloquently that Milwaukee took so much away from me. It took so much away from Black kids, but the things that they took away, they gave us in the first place. And I think that kind of really shifted what I thought home was. That home necessarily isn't always a constant thing, but it is giving you fundamental loyalty, fundamental love, fundamental whatever you are supposed to learn. And even if they take it away, it's still the first place that gave it to you. So you have to have some type of kind of responsibility to that place to make it better to the people that come after you. So I think that's the biggest thing that I learned while making the film was kind of reconciling what it meant for this place to be called a home, no matter what it did and did not do for Black kids here, and how we can kind of claim that for ourselves. But that was kind of mind-blowing to hear in that way that, hey, yeah, like love and loyalty and the things that are fundamentally who I am, I got from this place. Although it's not the most picturesque childhood or experience, like I did also experience those things as well, and those should be acknowledged and those should be put at the forefront of what it means to have pride about being from a place. So that's definitely what I learned for sure.
Yeah. David.
Yeah, I think shooting the film in Milwaukee really I guess kind of changed my perspective as a filmmaker, just in formulating how you kind of craft and sculpt the dialogue of your subjects, in preparation and in the questions that you ask them. One of the things you mentioned that came across in my film was kind of that the scrawny culture that you mentioned, and that was something, that I had a goal to kind of show. But my efforts in doing that, in my interventions, weren't the ways that it came out. I think the ways that I kind of tried to put questions into my interviews that would get people to speak to that, just didn't come out naturally and didn't really serve the narrative of my film. So it made me realize that, I think those are the sorts of things that, just need to be inherent in your film's subjects, and they'll, come out naturally. So, I guess that's what I learned, a great deal. And I hope that answers the question. I know it's not exactly learned about Milwaukee.
Yeah. Well, but I think, sort of that, the non-monolithic nature of subjects or individuals or of, residents of a city, right? I think that's in there too. Dante, do you want to take a stab at a question for the group? I don't want to hog the mic.
I actually do have a question. So, this shorts program is called 3 Ways of Looking at Milwaukee for a reason. And my question is about style. For each of you, what informed the style of your film, whether it's visually, whether it's through the editing, through the pacing of the story, so on and so forth.
Well, I'm
sorry, who's the question addressed to?
All of you, but it looks like Dick's going to take first stab, so you can think a little longer.
I was really interested in seeing how one could both kind of push and pull and squeeze images and give them a dynamic, both in terms of the different sections of the film and also internally to the film. So my model, in some ways, I had a really great editor, Yinan Wang. He's in China right now. I wish he were here too. But when we started working together, I said, okay, I want you to make this as if you were either like a really great pianist, right, who could change the dynamics of these images at will, could stop, could start, could speed, could slow, or a magician doing card tricks, right, to get this thing to move, to keep it moving, and in fact to keep slightly ahead of the audience, so you keep the audience with you, as opposed to losing them as it falls into into regularity. So that was the big challenge, and that was really interesting to me in developing a style for this particular film.
Yeah, the pianist metaphor resonates with me strongly because it's just seeing the visual assortment of what you have, Dick, makes me think of a composition.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh, thank you.
Anything you want to say, David or Marquise, with regards to your approach to the film style?
Yeah, I totally missed the question because my internet sucks, but I'm here and I hear it now. So we're here. Approach to style. I think the biggest thing that I wanted to do with this film was to get my community comfortable with cameras. What does it mean to have cameras in specific neighborhoods? What is the history of cameras in specific neighborhoods? And I think that was the biggest thing that me and my crew talked about, especially when we went out in the community to film. I think there's obviously such a justified distrust of not only like media and Black community members in Milwaukee, but it does change our perception of cameras when the only thing that we see is our death. So how do we flip that on its head? And then also knowing that documentary filmmaking is an invasive process. We are all up in people's business all the time. How can we make that less invasive? How can we make that less anti-Black? if how can we eradicate it from being anti-Black, period, right? You know, like, so a lot of nuances went into making it, and I think that we went into it with that, and we had very open and honest conversations with our subjects about what it meant for them to be on camera, how they felt on camera, and I think we checked in a lot, more than usual, more than we should have. We checked in a lot about how they felt about the presence of the camera being there. And I think, if anything, it was I think the Heartland is a great kind of case study for how we can continue to incorporate films or incorporate cameras into small communities and small cities that aren't really big film production markets, right? What does it mean for us to do that? So I think that was like the style that we took and the approach that we took. Because even with me, I get nervous. I think I'm really good at being an extrovert when I need to be, but I do really get nervous asking people, hey, do you feel like being on camera? Is that okay? Like, I can get really nervous about that. And it's also interrogating that. What does that mean? How can I break that barrier? How can I break that wall in between the camera and the person to let them know that they won't be exploited? What does it mean to be exploited, right? It's all these different conversations that were happening. And I know my crew, I thank God for them, because they listen to me run my mouth a lot and ask a ton of questions and be super particular about what we wanted. So I'm grateful that they rode with me and that they were down for it. But that's definitely the approach that we took. Like, all right, what does it mean for this camera to be here, period? And with that, how do we capture what we need to capture? Is it using longer lenses? Is it not being too close up? Is it just letting them be in their element? Are we saging things? And, you know, like, so it really took a lot of conversation on me and my team. And that's kind of how I like it. Everybody just talking, everybody just communicating on what is the best practice. So yeah, that's how we kind of knocked it out.
Yeah, and you mentioned people being comfortable with the camera. Something that stands out to me with your film is how people will look directly at the camera at certain points.
Yeah, some people were so animated. The kids are my favorite part. They love the camera. Oh my gosh, like, they were so animated, and we didn't have to ask them to be that. And that made me super excited about the future of film in the city. People are ready to be seen, but they're ready to see themselves in the way that they see themselves, not what other people are telling them. So when the kids are posted up and, you know, they're whole, you know, and they're just so excited to be on camera, they're excited to see themselves in a way that, unfortunately, a lot of the media that they watch, a lot of the news that they watch does not truly capture. So they're just ready to see their essence. So I was happy to be a catalyst for that. But I hope that when they see themselves, that they get super comfortable and super proud of themselves, that they make something totally, like, that they make something even better than the Heartland. That they're just like, all right, I see myself like that. I know I can do something better than that because that was trash. You know, like, I want them to have that energy and that confidence. So it was cool. The kids were great. Like, the kids were absolutely amazing.
Yeah, that's great. And David, you know, something that I found fun about your film was just how mobile it was. There's a lot of following people around, and yeah, I'm curious to know, you know, anything you want to share about, you know, your approach to the style that you determined for the film.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I definitely think the spaces in and around, you know, the areas in Milwaukee, we primarily shot the south side of Milwaukee, you know, in some neighborhoods around the airport and elsewhere, you know, and I think just the aesthetics of those neighborhoods definitely shaped our approach to shooting the film, and it definitely shaped, you know, the cinematographer I decided to work with, you know, and you know, our film is very much shot on shoestring, micro budget, and I knew that because of that, the aesthetics were going to end up a little bit raw, and we couldn't afford a lot of camera stabilization and all that. But I knew that just the kind of blue collar Milwaukee spaces that the bet housers themselves occupy, I knew that our approach would work well with that. So that's so we went with it, and but yeah, just the kind of classic Milwaukee Breweriana and all that shaped the visual aspect of the film for sure.
Indeed.
Coming up to the top of the hour, so I think if you have, I really want you to ask each other questions. So if there's one question that you have for one another or comments for one another, but I don't want to belabor the time.
I will just say I'm just really grateful to have my film featured in the company of the Heartland and Night and Day in Milwaukee. Both really striking, powerful pieces to me. And Marquise, your film was so powerful to me, and pertinent, and I feel it just comes from a place of hope and change, and I really feel a tangible sense in your film, and I just really appreciate that, and thank you for making the film. It's great. And Dick, I think there's some really striking images in your film as well, and it was really I guess kind of cathartic to see them again and see some familiar spaces, but also the images that they conjured up for me as I watched. So just thank you to both of you, and thanks to the fest for featuring me with both these great projects. So
yeah, thank you all for these films. Honored to have you.
Thank y'all for having us. Thank you, David, for those words. I really do appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah,
it means a lot.
I'd like to second that, Dave. Marquise, I really enjoyed your piece. It's a lovely set of films. I mean, aside from mine.
Including yours. It's a beautiful film, including yours as well.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes. I mean, as I said at the beginning, it was such a gift to have these three films come to us in the same year, right? To be able to sort of put a triptych that tells more than one story, but definitely not all of the stories that our city has within its variegation, its neighborhoods, its challenges, its beauties, its place and geography, naturalness, but also constructedness and humanness. So thanks for somehow psychically deriving that you needed to all submit this year. But we really appreciate your time, your films. Thank you so much for those. And we're going to keep our eyes peeled for your next projects.
Great.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.
Everybody.
Thank you all once again.
Thanks, Milwaukee Film Festival.
yes.